Father, we just want to thank you for this family. We thank you for your Shabbat, Father, and we just thank you that we can sit here together, we can catch our breaths, we can open up your word, and Father, that we can just hear what you have to say to us. Father, I pray that you speak to us, and we just thank you for those that are here. We're praying for Auntie Ange and them and the family. Father, we pray that everything would go well. I also pray for peace. Father, we just want to also pray for Renee. And we just thank you, Father, for the people that you're putting together, Father, for those that are here, for those that are coming. And we just thank you that you're in our midst. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so we're starting the book of Exodus. In Hebrew, it is not called Exodus, though. What is it called?
Exhibit, yes,
No.
Leaving.
No. Shemot.
I don't know how to
Shemot.
pronounce it.
Where did I get that name from?
Okay, that I don't.
Okay, look at the first line.
She.
No, the first
Oh,
line.
first line.
No, these are the names.
And these are the names. Shem is the word name. Shmot, if I can do it that way, is the plural, which means names,
So Exodus is names.
actually. Alright, so remember when they studied out portions, when they came to a new portion, if I were looking for the book of Exodus, I would look for that first line. And these are the names of, and I would realize that we're switching gears from Bereshit. Okay, so as it's shifting, remember this, one of the central things of Bereshit, what was the main thing sort of in the beginning? What did we keep on saying?
Creation? Creator?
In the beginning,
In the beginning, yes.
There's three.
it was really about the history, so the chronological order of events, whether it is about the history of creation, whether it is the history of the Table of Nations, whether it is the history of Adam and so on, whether it is the history of Abraham, right? Remember, you keep on seeing this word in Hebrew, it would be toldot, as generations. These are the generations of. With Shemot, we're carrying on with that, but now it becomes more focused on, if we think we know it's the story of the Exodus, and we're going, okay, well, now God has gotten them from Moses, this is what happened when I created everything, now to the point of, you understand how we got into Egypt, what happens when Joseph is no longer there, and that Pharaoh is no longer there. How did we get into that mess of bondage? Right. So we're going to be really focusing on how did we find them in Egypt, how does God get them out? All right, and through that we're going to deal with the Passover story, which is going to be good for you guys because we're going to have that extended version of going through the plagues and prepare you for Pesach, which will come up in the next 2 or 3 months. Okay, so if we open up to the book of Shemot, and we go from verse 1, it says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel who came into Egypt with Jacob, and each man came with his household. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher." Right? All told, there were 70 descendants in Jacob. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now, thinking of before Galatians, remember when you saw a list of names, the first question you're going to ask, is this in chronological order? Is it? Is that the list of sons as they were born?
No.
No. Okay, so look at the last one. Surely we should have Benjamin at the end. And here we've got Asher. Okay, so and then in the back of your mind, of any listing that God could have given, why does he give it like this? And then you can go and you can play that little thing called names mean stuff, and then we can put together a story. Okay? Do you guys want to do that?
Why not?
Let's do it. Let's take 2 minutes. I'm going to pause the recording for you guys just to write down the listings, and you should have the meanings of the names, and we can put them together. If there is a genealogy, there is something perhaps more to it, and we haven't even started trying to unpack that in paleo yet, right?
What's paleo?
Paleo is where you take out your bookmarks and say, now for instance, if we do Levi,
Yeah.
Levi is with a 5, and here 5, Lamed. So then we would see the word Levi, which we would translate as my heart or joint, would be the shepherd staff or the authority of the nail in the hand. Right? So then that tells you about a different story. Now, what is it about the group, the Levites, that will talk about the authority or the shepherd that has a nail in his hand?
By the priests. Yeshua came from.
Half tribe Judah, half tribe Levi. Alright? Or we can say, okay, well, if this is about God's heart, the shepherd will have a nail in his hand. Right? So then we start to see, oh, hang on a second, Levi is actually telling us a different story than just heart. Okay, so it's just something that to kind of expose you to the different layers that which we go through. Don't just, you're going to read it in your plain sense. Remember, we've got different layers when we study out the text. This will just give you a different layer to look at when you go through something. Okay, verse 6. Joseph died, as did all his brothers and all that generation. The descendants of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew very powerful. The land became filled with them. All right, so pause. Joseph died. What do you remember about the good man? Just one thing. You don't have to give a full...
He took care of the world,
Okay,
giving us food.
right?
Yeah,
He had a robe, which he had to lose a few times.
Yeah.
Yes? What else?
And God's will being completed through him.
Okay.
I think he also learned a lot of
He gave
life
forgiveness.
lessons. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of life lessons. He learned to
Be humble.
yeah.
but with that came forgiveness.
Right. You also see that he was a foreshadow of Christ in many different ways. And then we can also go now, okay, and all of his brothers died. What's the biggest thing you remember about the group of Israel, the sons of Jacob?
Is regtig oor competitive.
Ja.
You could just go with grumpy.
Yes. She wanted to say it nicely.
No one really liked favoritism.
Yeah.
Would you say they were jealous? A jealous group of people? Do you think they got it all right?
No.
No, absolutely not. Did we see very much humans with some seriously confused emotions and how they struggled with that, and that led them down choices? Yeah.
Talking a situation out with your brothers different than throwing them into a pit and selling them.
Right. We learned that selling your brothers is probably a bad idea. What you can take away from this is many things. Is that in the midst of it, God is using imperfect people to write His story.
Yeah.
You know, somehow we think as believers we have to be we have to be amazing and holy and pretty much levitate before God can use you. God is busy writing His story, using a whole bunch of guys with all of their flaws out in the open, and He says, listen, they struggled with this, but look at where I'm going to get them. They were all about themselves, they were all about their family, they did this, they did that, and eventually God took a completely dysfunctional family and brought them together in unity. And He says, right, when it's all said and done, you guys are going to sit around the same table and you guys are going to be okay. Now we forget that that's
Sure.
miraculous.
When you say it like that, completely dysfunctional, because that's what they were. Totally. And he did bring them back all together around from total
Yeah,
unity.
and to the point where they were happy to live together. Their father was happy. They were okay with their dad again. And he repaired relationships throughout this. And we again get to this place of, oh, you know, when I look at my family, are we ever going to get on the same page? Like, look, if God's busy doing it, then we can go through this process. Okay? So he says, yeah, all of them died, but Israel was fruitful and they increased abundantly, multiplied and grew very powerful, and the land became filled with them. And that's a different scenario now, okay? So we were at 70 when we came in. Generations are passing, and now all of a sudden God is going, remember the promise. Stars in the sky, sand of the seashore. Okay? All started with a 100-year-old man basically having his first child. The child of promise. Not Ishmael, but the child of promise. To go through, and he says, do you believe me, Abraham? Do you believe that I can do this? Yes, Lord. He says, a lot of the promises Abraham received, he didn't see the fruition of those promises. He says, you remember your children, they're going to go out, they're going to be slaves for a really long time, they're going to come back and they're going to take this whole land. This is going to be theirs. Okay, what did Abraham own?
Baie goed.
You know, he owned a lot of stuff, but how much land of Canaan did he actually own?
As far as the eye can see.
Did he own any land there?
One piece.
Ja, de grave. Waar hy sy goose begrawe het, man.
Ja, man, sy vrou.
Ja. Dis net ek moes intelligent klink so. Daar was ek weet hy het iets gekoop. Hy het 'n stukkie grond gekoop waar hulle mos nou al begrawe het.
It's the cave of Machpelah and the fields surrounding, right?
Yes.
So remember, there was a burial cave. That was the only real possession he had in a land that was promised to him, and he knew that that was his entirety. Him and his descendants. You know, sometimes we go, okay, Father's going to make you a promise, but he's going to make it for you and your generations, and he's going to say, well, you're not going to see this part, but believe me, I'll get it done. I want you, maybe in the back of your mind, think maybe you were a promise to someone else many years ago, and then you go, why am I sitting at this table right now? Because God told that person that there's someone in the generations that he wants to use that's going to do something different. Okay, so now there arose a new king over Egypt, new Pharaoh. He knew nothing about Joseph, but said to his people, look, the descendants of Israel have become people too numerous and powerful for us. Come, let us use wisdom in dealing with them. Otherwise, they'll continue to multiply, and in the event of war, they might ally themselves with our enemies, fight against us, and leave the land altogether. Okay, do you think that was a faith-based decision or a fear-based one?
Fear.
Okay. Think of what he's saying. If they turn on us, we will lose everything. And because of his fear, we're going to read in a bit, that he tried to oppress them. Eventually that will turn into slavery. And what was it that caused the downfall of Egypt? Because of the slavery, God used that slavery to turn Egypt over, and they lost everything. Sometimes when we operate out of fear, we are scared of the thing that's coming. It's actually what we basically run into the arms of that thinking. Right? It's a difficult thing to process.
Basically, you become what you fear.
Yeah, I'm so scared that I'm going to do this. I'm so scared I'm going to do that. And you can do everything within your power. And it's probably the one thing that's going to trip you up. So what do we have to do? Instead of operating out of fear, we operate out of faith. And he says something very interesting here. He did not know Joseph. Now, hello, this is a guy who saved Egypt. This is a guy who made Pharaoh rich and famous. This is a guy, he's probably got... His remains are still chilling over there. So what is that really telling you? He didn't know of him, or he didn't know him?
Person.
Right, and if I didn't know him, I didn't understand him. If I didn't understand him, I didn't understand his God. So now all of a sudden I'm looking at a whole bunch of people that are not Egyptians. They are what? What did he call them? So if these are Israelites and they're not Egyptians, these are not my people, how are you going to take over the land? If they take over the land, maybe they're going to take over Pharaoh. Maybe they're going to install their own king. And now all of a sudden they say, I've got this divided thing going on. Now I'm going to push to make sure that we make them subject to us so that he can continue to rule. Right? So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities in Pithom and Ramses. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded. Now listen, the world can do whatever they like. Satan can do whatever he likes. If God's got a plan to multiply and bless you, your situation might not look great, but God is busy even in the situation. You've got to look at the fruit. They are being multiplied, they are being expanded until the Egyptians came to dread the people of Israel and work them relentlessly. They are so scared of them that they have to control them. Instead of using them to become allies, fear has caused them to push them to resent them, and that resentment is going to do what?
Be the downfall.
Right, and then it's going to make them actually want to leave Egypt. Now, listen to the thinking. Who told them to stay in Egypt?
Joseph.
Oh, stay here, let me look after you. Joseph dies. Why are they still there?
Exactly, they could have picked up and...
They're still waiting on the promise of God.
Yeah, they should have left.
Or they probably feel they've got no one to lead them.
They should have left. Where are we supposed to be? God told our fathers that we're supposed to be in the land of Canaan. That's where we're supposed to bury Joseph. When Joseph died, why didn't we pick up everything and say, thanks very much, Pharaoh, we love you madly, Goshen is back yours. Let's take Joseph as he asked us to and said, let's put him and bury them over there. But instead we're becoming comfortable in our little place, and then we identify more as Egyptians than people of the promised land. So because you're comfortable, God also has to maybe turn up the heat a little bit until you get uncomfortable so you can actually leave.
So true, you rather do that what you know and that what is comfortable than get up and go do the unknown and that's what makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, you could have just like, okay, Father, well, we're actually not meant to be Egyptians, so why don't we go back to where we're supposed to be? But they didn't. They chose to stay. You see this again and again throughout the prophets for certain places. So they were multiplied and expanded until the Egyptians came and dread over them, and they worked them relentlessly. Verse 14, making their lives bitter with hard labor, digging clay, making bricks, all kinds of field work. And in all of this toil, they have shown no mercy. Excuse me, Kitty. They were shown no mercy. Okay? Moreover, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. Hebrew? Who was the first Hebrew again? Abraham, right. So why was he called a Hebrew and not an Israelite?
Abraham specifically.
No, I can't remember why.
But he was not from...
Jy moet weer terug gaan na daai
Ek kan dit nie in Engels
Nee,
sê.
bro. So sê dit in Afrikaans.
Hy was nie van Jakob se stam nie.
Okay. So then, because Israel, the name Israel only came later.
Ja.
Okay. And then, so why was he called a Hebrew?
He was of a different belief system, I know.
In the beginning, but Abraham was the forefather of the faith that Jacob followed, yeah?
Ja.
He crossed over to a different country.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That's okay. Do the crossing over.
Oh, okay.
The Hebrew word literally means cross over. Someone who had crossed over. He left a household full of idols and idolatry and followed a life with God. He had moved. Okay? So then there's this crossing over. Israel, remember, means something different. Someone who struggles or wrestles with God. Right? So, we see something interesting. Here they're getting referred to as Israelites, and then you've got Hebrew midwives. Look at the fruit of the different groups. Moreover, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of them called Shifra, the other Puah. When you attend the Hebrew woman and see them giving birth, he said, if it's a boy, kill them, but if it's a girl, let her live. Let's pause there. Why would I kill the boys and keep the girls?
Because boys can carry on
A lineage, okay. So you think there's some... So what would that mean if I get rid of them?
There's not going to be any more babies.
No, it's not.
Because
It has something to do with the men.
Yeah, because then the Egyptians can just
They won't be
take
that
Maar gaan
strong.
multiply nie
women
dat
for
dit
them. So they can carry on their lineage.
And what would you call that?
Because it won't be in Israel.
There would be it's assimilation.
Yeah.
Right? So as I'm bringing them in, then you're going to follow your husband, you are going to therefore become the wife of an Egyptian, and you are going to act Egyptian. So if I can get rid of the men, the leaders or the heads of the home, or those who are supposed to be in charge to remember the covenant, remember it's the father's job to make sure that the boy at 8 days old is circumcised and so on, that we are the sons of Abraham, all of that disappears. Now I want you to think about that. If that's a tactic of the enemy, what do you think that tactic still stands today?
Yes.
Very much. For men, as soon as you stand up in for faith, it's I'll say it this way, you're putting a target on your back. Why? You know that they've done studies that they say if a man comes to faith and he leads his household, the likelihood of the children continuing that faith is at 85%. If a wife comes to faith and she leads her household, not with the support of her husband, there is a chance of something only 20% that the children will continue in that faith. Now, why is that? Right? Remember, Father has put you in place. Whether we like it or not, we are ultimately responsible for our households. That was the design. God has given us helpers that are going to help us fulfill that role perfectly, or as best we can through Him. And we're going to go, okay, that fruit, as it says with the Shema, train your children diligently, right? If you teach your child how to walk this path, they will not depart from it at a later stage, right? I'm paraphrasing terribly, but it's what the text says.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the point that if the head is committed, then the rest will follow. All right. Verse 17, however, the midwives were God-fearing women, so they didn't do as the king of Egypt ordered, but let the boys live. The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and demanded of them, why have you done this and let the boys live? The midwives answered Pharaoh, it is because of the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian woman. They go into labor and give birth before the midwife arrives. Therefore, God prospered the midwives, and the people continued to multiply and grow very powerful. Indeed, because the midwives feared God, He made them founders of families. Then Pharaoh gave the order to all his people, every boy that is born, throw in the river and let the girls live. All right. So, I want you to understand what a risk it was for Shifra and Puah. Pharaoh has the say of life and death over you. So he's telling you, kill them or else. So they had to make a decision. What was the heart of their decision? Scripture says they were what?
God-fearing.
God fearing, not Pharaoh fearing.
No.
Look at the difference. If I do this, I anger God. Not Pharaoh. But if we don't do this, we anger Pharaoh, but we keep God happy. So I would rather lie to Pharaoh and make sure I stay with God than the other way around. Right? They took a big risk in this. And because of that, God remembers them. He goes, I'm going to make for them founders of families. Their names, Shifra, means pleasing, and Pua means radiant or splendid. It will be pleasing, a pleasing household, or a radiant or a splendid household. And we're saying, okay, Father, this is what He's going to establish. Because you were God-fearing, because you valued the lives of the children more than your own, I'm going to remember you. And Pharaoh, realizing he couldn't control them, watching that this thing that he's fearing, this Israelites that's getting out of control, what do I do? He says, now I'm going to come outright and say it. Instead of trying to kill them sneakily, now I'm going to send out a decree so they all know it's me. Okay? And he says, every boy is to be thrown into the river, but let the girls live. So what lives in the river?
Crocodilians and hippos.
Right.
Krokenholster.
And it's going to be a massive sacrifice to the god of the Nile. Remember? That is the place where the Nile is the lifeblood of Osiris. It is part of that lineage. Okay, so they're thinking. All right. How long have we been discussing for?
Not long.
Not long. Okay, good. Don't fall asleep on me.
Sorry, Tanya. It's long.
All right. A man from the family of Levi took a woman also descended from Levi as his wife. When she conceived and had a son, upon seeing it was a fine child he was, she hid him for 3 months. What does your translation say?
Beautiful child.
Beautiful child.
Fine child.
Fine child.
Okay, now there is a Jewish tradition that gets attached to this, and they kind of believe that when he came out circumcised.
No.
No. So,
What happened in that room?
believe it or not, I also, I'm like, where do you guys come up with this? But I actually found that there is a medical condition where some boys do come out
Oh,
in that guise. So I can't say
convenient.
absolutely you've lost your mind.
Painless.
I don't, however, think this was the case. I think the mitzvah was given to them for a reason, and it was, listen, this is what I want from you. Fathers, you will step up and you will do this. If I take that opportunity away from you, you cannot fulfill the mitzvah.
Isn't there a verse later on that says God was after them because they weren't circumcised?
His children.
Oh, his children.
Yes, we'll get to that. And so here we are, we see this wonderful child and we hide him for 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she took papyrus basket, coated it with clay and tar, put the child in and placed it among the reeds on the riverbank. Now immediately you're thinking of another story. No. What other thing that I take that was covered with pitch and tar that created a safety from water?
The flood.
The
ark.
I mean the ark. I meant to say ark.
So now all of a sudden, remember it's got the same thing. They took clay and tar and there was a kapera, a covering. And that covering separated him from death. So immediately now in the back of your mind you're going, all right, let's talk. Noah and Moses here for some reason have got like an interesting play. What do you think that is?
They were both carried in the basket.
Okay, in a sense.
In
So God lifted them out of the chaos.
Through the mikvah type of thing, I don't know.
Okay, well, they both were pulled from the water. So again, that separation of the difference between life and death was the covering. And that covering again points to the word atonement, right? So this is like Christ will be the covering. Secondly, what did Noah do when he came off the ark?
Yeah.
Okay, so Noah all of a sudden sets up altars, so he's going to focus on worship. How many people were on the ark? 8. So this is about something new creation. So God is going to do something new as he's going to get rid of the chaos through an atonement. Is that not the Passover story?
Yes.
Right. He sets it up in a Hebraic thought. Okay, does that make sense? All right. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the riverbank. Here. You imagine 3-month-old baby. Yeah, this is mommy. We've got nothing else to do. We can't hide him anymore. Father, please save my child. I'm going to create of him a place and hope that God protects him. Now you're sending this down the river with crocodiles and hippos.
It's like telling the crocodiles, yes, lunch.
How many other children were killed in that river? I want you to think forward. Remember, one of the first plagues he does is he does what to that river? Remember when you killed my children? It's now coming back upon your head. All right? So God is remembering the moment, just like he remembered Shifra and Puah, that this is reality. You don't mess with innocence. Okay? He goes in, he says, his sister, this is Miriam, we'll find out later, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river while her maid in attendance walked along the riverside. Spotting the basket among the reeds, she sent her slave girl to get it. Okay, she went to go bathe in the river. Is that because Pharaoh couldn't have a bath in his house?
No.
Okay, so when you see bathing in the river, I want you to think pagan worship. Okay, it was an act of worship to go down into the river and wash yourself clean. In a sense, this is a public viewing thing. Can you imagine her having a bath in front of everybody? Not so much, yes?
Not Pharaoh's daughter.
Exactly. So if it was about pagan worship and she came and she paid homage and she went into the river and then she spotted something, she was busy worshipping her idol when God sent Moses down the river. So he used what she would do in a pagan reality to save Moses.
Sure.
She probably thought this was a sign from her God.
Quite possible.
Yeah.
What gift does the Nile give? The Nile gives life. Without the Nile, we all die. It's about fertility and fertile lands and crops and all these good things. And look, it gives me a kid.
I must have killed it.
Absolutely. So, she opened the basket, spotting the basket in the reeds, she sent her to the slave girl to get it. Okay, pause. Moses again parking at the reeds. The Red Sea in Hebrew is not called the Red Sea. It's called the Sea of Reeds.
Oh.
Okay, so again, Moses is sitting there in something that should drown him. He will actually be able to be drawn out. Okay, it's called Yom Suf. She opened it and looked inside, and there in front of her was a crying baby boy. Moved with pity, she said, "This must be one of the Hebrews' children." Okay, probably a good indication that there was a boy in a river. That's clue number 1. Number 2, something was missing. At this point, his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find you one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Now this seemingly slave girl pops out of nowhere and he goes, "Hey, you're going to need milk. I know a lady."
Out of nowhere.
She doesn't think it's yeah.
Like she didn't know.
Yes,
Into
I was just walking past.
Yeah.
Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes, go." So the girl went and called the baby's own mother. "Mom, you won't believe what happened to the basket." Pharaoh's daughter told her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay you for doing it."
No, that's nice.
And she's like, can you imagine?
Paying the mother to have a baby.
Now I want you to see what that would do for her. You're sitting over there, "Father, please save my son." All of a sudden, Pharaoh's daughter, you want to save him, maybe by you saving him from slavery. "Father, I want you to physically save him." And God pitches up and goes, "I'm going to give you one better. Now, you're going to get paid for being his mom, where before you were persecuted. Secondly, he's going to grow up with you for a while, and then he's going to go live in the palace. And you've got to stop and you've got to go, "Father, I didn't see this coming when I put him in a basket." Right? So the woman took the child and nursed it. Then when the child had grown some, this is the way this one puts it, she brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, and she began to raise him as her son. Pause. Your translation will probably say when he was weaned. Right? When the child was old enough. Now, weaning today meant probably you stop feeding the baby by natural means at about what age? When do we stop breastfeeding?
4 years.
Yeah, you said it the other day.
Yeah, for some of these guys it was up to 7 years or up to 5 years.
And I'm sure she tried to push it for as long as she
Now
could.
I want you to think.
I was taking it with you.
This wasn't a 6 month give baby back, now baby can start nibbling on solids type of thing. This kid grew up. What do you think mommy and daddy were telling him after he was returned?
Installing all the values and Torah and laying all their foundation in him.
And what they understood is that God saved you for a reason. Boy, don't forget you're going to go stay in Pharaoh's house now, but don't you ever forget you're a Hebrew. Let me tell you about Joseph, and let me tell you about Jacob, and let me tell you about Isaac and Abraham. Remember the promise. God might use you in the palace to set your people free. I don't think that's a far stretch. Now you will be part of the government. Maybe you can make a difference. Maybe it was a case of just don't forget that you're a Hebrew. Don't forget where you come from. Afterwards, she gives him and she says, "All right, here, I've handed you over. I handed over this child to God. She saved him. Now I'm handing over, sending her to Pharaoh's daughter." And she called him Moshe. Okay, now funnily enough, I always thought Moses or Moshe was a Hebrew term. Apparently it's more Egyptian than it has anything to do with Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Hebrew linguistics. Far cleverer guys than me said, look, this is more Hebrew. There's more Egyptian than anything else. And the word for her meant I pulled him out. I drew him out of the water. Now I want you to think, if this becomes part of his function, what is God going to use Moses for?
He's going to draw his people out of slavery.
And he's going to get through water.
Ta-da!
So it becomes a foreshadow of the Red Sea, a big foreshadow of what Moses is going to do. He pulled you out the sea of reeds, and there was life because I saved you. And God is going to do exactly the same thing. All right? He says, because I pulled him out of the water. One day when Moses was a grown man, he went out to visit with his kinsmen, and he watched them struggling at forced labor. So he's grown up in Pharaoh's place. Now he's going to go visit his Hebrew brothers and sisters. So we see that identity thing is well put inside of his mind. He saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He looked this way and that, and when he saw that there was no one around, he killed the Egyptian, hid the body in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrew men fighting with each other. To the one in the wrong he said, "Why are you hitting your companion?" He retorted, "Who appointed you ruler and judge over us?" Now I think this is going to sting him a little bit, but at a later stage, Moses will become both ruler and judge over the Israelite people. Okay? do you intend to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian? Moses became frightened. Clearly, he thought the matter has become known. So what was it about what was going on that made Moses so mad? That can tell you something about his character.
Love for his people.
Possibly. So you mess with my peeps, you mess with me.
Human, it's a bit.
Okay, some people will say he hated injustice,
Yeah.
and we're going to see that play out maybe a little bit later. We just got to understand that this guy took a big risk, and unfortunately for him, the matter became known. When Pharaoh heard of it, he tried to have Moses put to death. Well, this is the second time that Moses is nearly killed. But Moses fled from Pharaoh to live in the land of Midian. Second time he's saved. One day, he was sitting by a well. The 7 daughters of the priest of Midian came to draw water. Okay, now we stop and go, girls at a well. What does this sound like?
Yeah, Rebecca.
Rebecca and Eleazar. And what about
When I think it was Noah. No, yeah. When he sent a servant to go get like water.
That's Rebecca with Isaac, right? Eleazar went to. That's right. Who else met his wife near a well?
Jacob.
Jacob with?
Rachel.
Right. Okay, it's in the family. You know, it's like,
Like that.
And that should also give you an interesting little foreshadow of when Yeshua is sitting at a well and he meets another woman, the Samaritan lady. And he talks to her about,
Her husband.
yes, where's your husband at? After a long story about living water, comes back to marriage. Okay? Says, they had filled their troughs to water their father's sheep. When the shepherds came, they tried to drive them away. Does Moses like when you pick on people? No, but Moses got up and defended them. Then he watered their sheep. Interesting. Remember when Eliezer came with the camels and Rebecca came out and she went, okay, here, and bring water. When Jacob came out, there was a big stone that was covering. He says, no, we have to wait for them to come in.
Off. Guys.
It's not me.
Off.
I'm getting cuddles.
He wants to cuddle me a lot. He goes over to her.
So when Jacob comes in, you remember he picks up the covering of the stone so that he can water the sheep. All right, so we see an interesting about, maybe he doesn't like bullies, number one. Number two, he still wants to serve. When they came to Reuel, or Reuel, what do you guys have there? Reuel? All right, pay attention. Then they came to Reuel, their father. He said, how come you're back so soon today? They answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. Is he an Egyptian? No, he's a Hebrew.
Still look like one.
Exactly. So the distinction or the separation was, this is a guy who, like Joseph, probably shaved his head, shaved his eyebrows, shaved everything to look completely separate and different. Okay. He goes, more than that, he drew water for us and watered the sheep. He asked his daughters, where is he? Why did you leave the man there? Invite him to have something to eat. So this was obviously a common problem for his daughters. Obviously didn't have a son to be able to defend them. And here, this guy steps up and he does it. Moses was glad to stay on with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah in marriage. She gave birth to a son and she named him Gershom, which means a foreigner there. For he said, I have been a foreigner in a foreign land. I find that very interesting. Why is that weird?
Because he was an alien anyway.
He was an alien in Egypt. He's saying, I've been a foreigner here in Midian. It's like you were actually a foreigner in Egypt. You weren't really meant for there. You were supposed to be in the promised land. Okay? But this is And they named their kids situationally sometimes. Sometime during those many years, the king of Egypt died. But the people of Israel still groaned under the yoke of slavery. Oh, sorry. Under the yoke of slavery, and they cried out. And their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. I want to pay careful attention to this. They cried out. Does it say to who?
They just said to God.
What you got?
Oh no, they cried out.
So it only
They
says
just
they
said
cried out, and
Yeah.
then it went up to God.
Yeah.
It don't say
Right.
they cried
So
out
I think
to
there
God.
were a few who were crying out to God and some who don't
Crying
even
out
know.
to
Remember,
the Egyptian gods.
God's promise, how long were they supposed to be in slavery for?
400 years.
400 years. 400 years of Egyptian mentality, Egyptian living, generation after generation. We're Hebrews, but we're in this land. This isn't Joseph died, next guy pop up. We're talking about hundreds of years of ways of thinking. The slavery is uncomfortable, but God already told Abraham, 400 years, they will be stuck. Don't worry, I'll judge the nation that does that. Okay? So I think there is a lot of this where people cried out and they didn't even know who their God was. There's a big difference. But the cry came up to rescue them from slavery, or came up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. God remembered. When you hear that, what are you supposed to ask the question? What does remembered mean?
He did not forget.
Oh, so if he remembered,
Did he forget? No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
God is a God that doesn't forget.
he doesn't
How did he
forget.
that?
The word
How does he
remember.
remember?
Oh yeah, where did I put those Hebrews? Oh, there they are. If you didn't scream, I wouldn't have known where to find you. The word remember in Hebrew means to act on behalf of. It's not just remember because, oh yeah, I've got to do something. I will now, the time has come, to act on their behalf. I remembered.
Remember the meaning?
Act on their behalf. So when I come to the place of the time is now right, the 400 years is coming to a close, it's now time for me to fulfill my promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So even though Abraham is long gone, Isaac is long gone, Jacob is long gone, God will act on behalf of his covenant. The promise that he made is the promise he will keep, and he will continue to keep that. The land, the people of the land, still, God remembers his covenant. Okay? God saw the people of Israel, and God acknowledged them. It's now time. I'm going to get ready to set you free.
I've got here, so God looked at the Israelites and was concerned about them.
It's a case of, again, it's just a case of focusing on the situation and going, he knew, up until the day, up until the hour, what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. Everything else, my timing. Remember, why was he waiting so long again? Why did he promise Abraham that it was going to be 400 years long?
Timing.
Because he said the wickedness of the Amorites has not yet come to pass. The Amorites were the ruling power in Canaan. So he says, I'm giving the Amorites 400 years to get their act together. They're not going to get their act together, but I'm still going to give them the opportunity to. When they don't, then I will remove them. I will set free your people, and so that the land, the title deed, will then become theirs instead of the Amorites. Okay? God waits 400 years for people to
just get the
Activate.
extract, yeah.
God is
Ja,
patient.
dit is baie generasies en.
How many times do we sit there, we look at our situation, we look at other situations, and we go, how long can we go on like this? And he's waiting.
Maybe 400 years.
And he's waiting patiently for people to open up their eyes because he doesn't want to lose one. if you look at the world governments, if you look at our governments, and you see everything that's not coming, that's not right, and we're going, Father, please remove them, and he was going, I need to save them. They will have no excuse. But when the time comes, then their time is up. Okay? Doesn't matter how strong they think they are, doesn't matter what. If God has put someone in place, you will have an opportunity to do right or wrong. If you do wrong, you will deal with him. It's the same as anybody in any sort of authority, whether you're the authority in your home or whether you're the authority of a country. Either way, everything is governed by God. All right. We'll pause there, and then we're going to go into a... All right. Now, chapter 3,
Gus.
we see... Now, Moses was tending the sheep of Jethro, his father-in-law.
Moses.
Yes.
Jethro.
Jethro, right? But when in chapter 2, he wasn't called Jethro.
Yeah, he was called Ruel.
Ruel.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so it's actually the same guy, but we have this interesting thing where the name sort of transfers. So we got to think, okay, well, what is Ruel? What does it mean?
Tell us, please, what does Ruel mean?
Friend of God. And
Oh,
Jethro, okay, means to remain over, as in a surviving remnant or something that is leftovers. Right, so we got the friend of God dealing with Moshe. There will be a remaining over, okay, or more than over. So it's an interesting concept. It says the priest of Midian. Does that sound like a good God-fearing boy? Remember, he is the Midian, or God-fearing, our God-fearing. The Midianites worshipped idols, right? So look at how this plays out. Moses becomes a testimony eventually to the Egyptians. He becomes a testimony to the Hebrews. He also becomes a testimony to his father. 3 different nations get impacted because of the testimony of one man. All right? And we'll see what that looks like later. Leading the flock far aside in the desert, he came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. Now, Horeb and Mount Sinai are the same place. Also interchangeable name. Okay? The angel of Adonai appeared to him in a fire blazing from the middle of a bush. He looked and he saw that although the bush was flaming with fire, yet the bush had not been burnt up. Now it's an interesting thing, the word bush here implies something of a thorn type of bush. Some will say a bramble bush or a blackberry bush, or they believe that the constant reality is it says something that was thorny. All right, think God appearing in between something that is difficult or of heat or refining, yet not all consuming, and it has to do with something of thorns. Yes, no?
Okay.
A refining moment with thorns. What did Messiah have on his head? Crown of thorns. Was it a difficult moment?
Yes.
Right, it was part of refining. It says the angel appeared before God in a fire. Then it says he took and he saw, although the bush was flaming with fire, yet the bush was not being burnt up. Moses said, I'm going over to see this amazing sight and find out why the bush isn't being burnt up. When Adonai saw that he had gone over to see, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moshe, Moshe. He said, Hineni, here I am. He said, don't come any closer. Take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you're standing is holy ground. So he calls him, tells him to stop, remove your sandals. Okay? Says, I am the God of your father. Same people he grew up in, understood he's part of the covenant, and so on. He continued, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov. Remember the chapter before, I will remember the covenant. Moses covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Adonai said, I have seen how my people are being oppressed in Egypt and heard their cry for release from their slave masters. Because I know their pain, I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the country to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Yes, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen how terribly the Egyptians oppress them. Therefore, now come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you can lead my people, the descendants of Israel, out of Egypt. All right. So God sets the stage. Look at the pretty birdie. Get his attention, bring him over, and now he reveals himself and he says, this is what's going to happen. This has been part of my plan. Now, around what age do you think Moses was?
40.
40 when he left Egypt.
Well, ooh. 65.
Eh? Remember, we have three cycles, right? It was 40 when he left Egypt, and then when he goes to lead the people, we believe he was around the time of 80 years old, and he dies at 120. Okay? So, yeah.
So basically, he was
That's
middle
all.
aged. Yeah, he was middle aged.
Ja, vir daai mense, daai tyd.
No, not so much. So he spent. Think of the process he's been through. For 40 years, he was trained as a prince. He understands the court system. He understands their gods. He understands their expectations. He understands warfare. He understands it all. And he got it wrong. He couldn't liberate his people in that system. So God had to teach him something else. You tried it by your hand. Now you're going to probably spend 40 years as a shepherd. Now you understand something differently. What did he need to learn? I need to teach you how to shepherd my people. Okay? You're going to look after each one as if they're part of the flock. And notice, he's still not looking after his own flock. He's still looking after the flock of Jethro. He understands something. What I look after benefits my father, but benefits my father-in-law, it's also going to benefit me. It's going to benefit my wife. It's going to benefit my kids. Right? So this is a collective thing that I've got going on here. Now, if I'm going to do this on behalf of God, and I am going to have to be a good shepherd, I am going to have to lead them out. I'm going to draw them out. That's what God is going to do. God says, this is what I'm going to do. And then he says, now I'm going to send you. All right. Moses said to God, now I want you to mark this down. Excuse number 1. Excuse number 1 that comes out of Moses' mouth, who am I? Right? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Okay? God gives him a specific answer to each excuse that he's going to come up with. So, apply this to your life. God pitches up, he goes, look, it's me. He says, I want to do something. I'm sending you. Who am I? God's answer, he replied, I will surely be with you. Notice the shift in focus. Who am I? And God says, I will be with you. It's not about who you are. It's about me. Right? So if you are busy doing kingdom work, if you're doing what God has called you to do, it's got nothing to do with your ability. It's got nothing to do with your identity. It's got nothing to do with your name. It has got everything to do with what God is going to do through you. Your job is to be obedient so that they can see him. I will surely be with you. Your sign that I have sent you will be that when you have led the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Okay? So when he brings them back all the way to Sinai, for Moses, it's one clean loop. God said we would end up right back here. And remember, on this mountain we see a burning bush. Later, he's going to get the 10 Commandments. He's going to go up to the entire mountain that's set on fire. It's not just the bush that's afire now. It's the entire mountain God will descend on. Okay? And taking off your sandals because this is holy ground, God will say, put up a banner all around the mountain. This is holy ground. So it's like this little revelation for you, bigger revelations that will come. Moses said to God, excuse, look, when I appear before the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What am I to tell them? When I pitch up and they say, what's his name? What must I say? Now remember, the word name means what is your reputation? What is who you are, is what you've done. Okay? So excuse number 2 is, I don't know your name.
What is his name?
Okay. God's response. God said to Moshe, I'm going to write this down for you phonetically. He says something interesting. We've spoken about this before. Ehye, Asher, Ehye.
I am who I am.
Close.
I will be.
It's future tense of I am who I am. Okay, your translations will have there I am who I am. The tense is future, it's not present.
So I will be who I will be.
Now look at the excuse. What was his excuse? What? I don't know your name, or like, what is your function? What are you going to be? I know whose authority I'm going to be, and he goes, I will be what I will be.
That's pretty cool. Mic drop moment.
It's enough. Look at the statement. Okay. Now we're going to get into this. This becomes part of pronunciation problems that we have. Okay. Right. So he goes, Ehye, Asher Ehye, and he added, here is what you are to say to the people of Israel. Ehye, I will be, has sent me to you. God said further to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. Yud He Vav He. Your translation, Lord or God in all caps.
You are the Lord your God. The Lord the God of your fathers.
Okay, Yud He Vav He, those 4 letters. The God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered generation after generation. Okay? So he says, I will be what I will be. And then he says, I am Yud, He, Vav, He. In Hebrew, remember these four letters. All right, so just quick recap. How do you pronounce that? Right, probably most likely. What do most people think that this is pronounced as? Yahweh or Yahuwah. Okay, you'll hear people, I'm not fanatical about how you want to pronounce it. I think that if you're going to say it in a certain way, at least understand why you're saying it in a certain way. Okay? What he does here is, I believe what's most important is he talks about, this will be my name forever. Eche, I will be. So the tense or the context of what this should be has to do with time. Right? This will be my name forever. This is how you'll be remembered through generation after generation. I will be what I will be. I was. I am. I will be. Was. I am. I will be. This is my name forever. This is how you will remember me from generation to generation. Why is that important? Because God is not simply giving a name, He's telling you, I will be what I need to be. And that changes depending on your situation. Right? For us, for many of us, the start of our relationship with God is that He was our salvation. Or He is the God who redeemed me. So He is my Yeshua. Yeshua, He saved me. Right? Maybe in time you go through a difficult month or 20, and then He becomes my El Shaddai.
20?
My every need. Now, for us, it was probably close to 5 years. And we saw His hand every single month after month, month after month, month after month. And when we didn't know which way was up, He pitched up in different ways and somehow just took care of us to be able to carry on. Okay? Here, in function, He's making, I believe, a statement. Because names and God, the way He uses His titles, is all about relationship. I believe what He's saying is, I am eternal. It's about time. I was, I am, I will be. Don't come here with who am I. Don't come here with tell me who's your name. You can't encapsulate that. Listen, I was at the beginning. I'm standing in front of you. I will be what I will be to Pharaoh. Okay, number one. Number two, remember with the paleo? A hand reveals the nail to reveal. So the Eternal One will reveal Himself through a hand and a nail. It's a picture of the cross, Yeshua. And this is how He will be remembered from generation to generation. The God who sent His Son to die for me so I may receive eternal everlasting life. Okay. So, Ehyeh. I will be. Alright? Verse 16. Go gather the leaders of Israel together and say to them, Adonai, or Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, has appeared to me and said, I have been paying close attention to you and have seen that what is being done to you in Egypt. And I have said that I will lead you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. They will heed what you say. Then you will come, you and the leaders of Israel, before the king of Egypt, and you will tell him, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of the Hebrews. So notice how he changes tact when he's dealing with Pharaoh. So before, it's Israel, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm the covenant-keeping God. I'm the one who promised you land. I'm the one who led Abraham. Don't worry about it. I can take you from one place to the next. I can provide for your need in that transition. I can put you in a place and establish you. He did that with all three of those guys virtually. He established their name in the places in which He did. He blessed them and multiplied them and continued to build that relationship and that covenant. I can do that for you. Here, when he goes to Pharaoh, he says, I'm the God of the Hebrews. Oh, I used to talk to a Gentile man once. He left Mesopotamia and he followed me. He didn't believe in idols anymore. You see, that becomes almost an open invitation to Pharaoh going, well, what's a Hebrew? Well, let me tell you about the first Hebrew. Okay? Has met with us. Now please let's go 3 days journey into the desert so that we can sacrifice to Adonai our God. I know that the king of Egypt will not let you leave unless he is forced to do so. But I will reach out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders that I will do there. After that, he will let you go. So Moses, you're going to tell him this. He will let you go eventually, but he's got some issues. Okay? Moreover, I will make the Egyptians so well disposed towards this people that when you go, you won't go empty-handed. Rather, all the women will ask of their neighbors and house guests for silver and gold jewelry and clothing with which you will dress your own sons and daughters. In this way, you will plunder the Egyptians. So as they left, remember just before they left, they took all of the wealth of Egypt that was built up by who? Really, by Joseph? right? Because Joseph made the land prosperous, and he made Pharaoh even more prosperous. And when Pharaoh and everything, and that when the famine and that settled, then Egypt continued to grow. He says, now you're going to take that wealth with you. Now, why would he allow you to take that wealth?
He wants to get rid of them. Go.
Just take them away.
He planned it for them.
Why? Now, I want you to think ahead. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of gold, and I'm going to take you to a place where you can't spend it.
They want to teach him lessons along the way.
Desert,
Partly. Why else?
Egypt.
Tabernacle.
Some people, yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to build a tabernacle. You're going to need gold and jewels and all those things, and we're going to get from there. Okay? All right. So, excuse number one is what?
Who am I?
Who am I? God's response is,
I shall be with you.
I will go. Second excuse,
Who are you?
I don't know your name.
In a sense, he's asking, who am I, then who are you?
Your reputation, what is by what authority, in a sense, is that he's bringing to. And God gives him, I will be what I will be, and you are going to do all of these things. Chapter 4. Moshe replied, but I'm certain they won't believe me and they won't listen to what I say, because they'll say, Adonai did not appear to you. Excuse number 3 is,
Why did you not believe me?
they won't believe me. Because they won't believe, they won't listen.
Wat het gekom?
The children.
Wat bedoel
That's why they should be sitting down.
Verse 2 says, Adonai answered, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. Throw it to the ground. And he threw it onto the ground, and it turned into a snake. And Moses recoiled from it. Then Adonai said to Moshe, put your hand out and take it by the tail. He reached out with his hand and took hold of it, and it became a staff in his hand. This is so that they will believe that Adonai, the God of the fathers of God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Right, first sign. Throw down your staff. Why didn't he say, go grab that stick?
The staff here is probably more used.
Okay, what does the staff represent?
Authority.
Right, so he says, by what authority are we doing with this?
By his authority.
Right, so Moses is focusing more on God's authority or his own?
His own.
So his identity is like, hey, listen, I can't do this, they won't believe me. The focus is very here. So he says, take that thing which you have now become accustomed to. Before you had a ruler's staff, you were somewhat of Egypt.
No, you don't know. So, I thought you were
Before you were accustomed to a ruler's staff. Now you've become accustomed to a shepherd's staff. Now I want you to understand when I call you what type of authority I'm going to give you. It's a very different dynamic that he's used to, okay? He says, throw it on the ground, and it turned into a snake. Why didn't it turn into a hippocrocodilian? Or a unicorn? Or a rhinoceros or an elephant?
Because the snake was in the tree.
No.
What of?
It's the beginning.
Wasn't a snake like
He represents-
an Egyptian god or something?
Partly. So it would be
The Pharaoh's
as...
head was also like a.
Sometimes it would be a thing according to Pharaoh, but I also want you to think back in the garden. I'm sending you to Pharaoh. Now, God has not changed, yeah? Does he want Pharaoh to be saved?
Yes.
Okay, so how am I going to help Pharaoh understand? If someone believes something as truth, or you're not going to call them deceived and help them understand the deception they're under. How did we get underneath that deception? You believe the lie of the snake.
Yeah.
You understand? Why would God tell you not to do that? Why would God tell you this? You're not going to... You just want to, you can become like God. What did Pharaoh believe?
He is good.
He was a God. Right? So the deception is not just gone to what you worship. You are deceived even in yourself to think that you have had that deception from the very beginning, that you would become like God and know the difference between good and evil. Pharaoh thinks he is God. So I'm going to help you understand through a deception. This is an interesting thing because it only applies here with Moses. In Hebrew, the word here is nachash. Okay? Nachash. You want me to write it down?
Yes, please.
It's an important... We'll do it phonetically. Okay, CH is the noise. You can write it with KH if you need to. This is the word for snake in Hebrew. This is what he gives us here. It turned into a nachash. Alright? This is going to come up later. So he goes out and he picks it up again. He says, grab it by the tail. Why doesn't he say grab it by the head? Right, okay. He says, remember, we're going to pick it up when it's not looking and then it's going to come back. Under God's authority, the serpent is going to have no bite. Remember, he told the Garden of Eden, the enmity between man and the snake. Someone will bruise his head and he will bruise his heel. Right? That's Messiah's job. Right now, you're not worrying about trampling the snake dead. You just want to pick it up so that you understand that God's authority is going to take hold of this, okay? So he goes on. He says, here's the next sign. That's the first sign if they won't believe you. The second sign he gives him. Furthermore, Adonai said to him, now put your hand inside your coat. And he put his hand in his coat. And when he took it out, it was leprous, as white as snow. Then God said, now put your hand back into your coat. He put his hand back into his coat, and when he took it out, it was healthy as the rest of his body. Right? If they won't believe you or heed the evidence of your first sign, they will be convinced of the second. 2 signs. Put your hand in your pocket, pull it out, and then you have an incurable disease. Why is that a fun party trick? What is God trying to tell him now?
Is that going to chase a lot of people away from him?
Generally.
Maybe I'm the God of the incurable.
Okay, I can bring you healing, number 1. Number 2, the word here for leprosy in Hebrew is a word that plays back to tsa'arat. Tsa'arat. Now that generally has to be tied in with blasphemy. If you won't believe and you speak against God, I can also strike you with this. Remember later, I don't know if you guys know the story, Miriam and Aaron, Moses' sister and brother, would come up to him and they would tackle him or take him on about Moses' wife. And there was an issue there, and God says, 3 of you report to the tabernacle, let's talk. And he actually strikes Miriam with leprosy. And while they're still panicking about what this means, because this is incurable. Right? This is why it was such a massive thing. When Yeshua healed someone like this was like, wow, this doesn't happen. And we get to the place where he says he struck her and he healed her at the same time. And he says, if someone comes in, if a daughter comes into the house and, what's the word I'm looking for? Disrespects her father, would the father not... Below. No, you can't say Nyaman.
You can.
You're more than welcome to say shish. If you get to the place where you go, wouldn't the father not spit in her face and put her outside the camp for a little bit? Absolutely. So, he says, put her outside the camp for 7 days and you wait for her to heal and then she can come back in. She's healed, she needs to be outside the camp for 7 days to make sure that it's not spread. So we get to this place of, I can be your healer, or if you want to speak against me, this is where you're going. So it becomes an interesting second sign. But if they aren't persuaded even by both these signs and still won't listen to what you say, then take some water from the river, pour it out on the ground. The water you take from the river will turn to blood on dry land. Okay, so that's similar to like the first plague, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And here he says, if they won't listen to one second witness, there's a third one. Okay? Why? Well, I suppose we'll get to that one when we get to the Nile and the blood and so on. Verse 10. Moses appeared to Adonai, Moses said to Adonai, "Oh Adonai, I'm a terrible speaker." After all that, excuse number 4.
How come?
Well, some people believe that. Other people believe that he wasn't fantastic at Hebrew. Okay? It could be one or the other. I'm not saying it is. I'm just going to give you a different interpretation on it. So either he doesn't know how to speak good, or he's being sent to the leaders of Israel and he doesn't have, I'm going to go speak Hebrew, but I grew up as an Egyptian. Help me understand. They're not going to believe me. Right? I don't know if it's one or the other. He goes, I'm a terrible speaker. I have always been. I have no better now, even after you've spoken to your servant. My words come slowly. My tongue moves slowly. Adonai answered him, who gives a person a mouth? Who makes a person dumb or deaf, keen-sighted or blind? Isn't it I, Adonai? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what to say. God's response, I'm bigger than your mouth, but I can do this through you easily. But he replied, excuse number 5. Please, Lord, send someone else, anyone you want.
He is.
This is, again, human response.
Yeah, now he's really getting to the point of bluntly saying no.
I love your plan.
But
Let me know when you're done.
Yeah.
I'll be here with the Scorpies.
Sure.
Notice the next response. At this, Adonai's anger blazed up against Moses. Patient with you once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Now you're just telling me you will flatly not go. What does that tell you about God?
Patient.
If he could wait 400 years for Amorites, why couldn't he be extra patient with Moses here? You said Moses is being, Moses, you're being silly. Why does his anger why does his anger blaze up?
Because he's not trusting in him.
He's so focused on himself, and the reality is, he just doesn't want to listen. So it's like, now think about it from God's viewpoint. I saved you in the Nile. I saved you from Pharaoh. I allowed you to come here, lived in peace. You've had 40 years of education in Pharaoh's household. You've had 40 years of being trained as a shepherd. My boy, it is now time for you to fulfill the purpose that I have for you. And all you can go is me, I. This is basic human problematic issues that we face with this, that we are so focused on our own lives and what we can do and what we will do and what we won't do, that we forget that we said we will surrender to God because He is our Creator.
No, this is so funny. I'm thinking a lot of times we pray and we ask God for answers and what to do, and we think we get them because we're going by the judgment call, but here God's actually physically speaking to him. Like if I was to hear God physically come to me and say, "Listen, do this," which I think a lot of people would want that. And now Moses is getting it like a direct order, and he's still ignoring it.
Yeah, we have to kind of be cautious. When God asks you to do something, it's an invitation. Right? If He chooses to use you, it's because that He's prepared you for that moment. He wants to teach you something. He wants to help you grow, but He also wants to use you.
And He will be with you.
The whole time. He's not going to give you a commission that He won't fulfill through you. Right? No matter how strange it might be. Some of the prophets did some interesting things. You know, it's like go and take your linen undergarments and go walk to your Euphrates and stick them in the wall and then come back. And then when you go back, you go fetch them and they're all dirty and gross and moldy. And then you go show the people, these are your undergarments. And you got to be sitting there thinking,
He lost the plot.
okay. And we're not even going to get really into what Ezekiel had to go through. But there are these moments where God will go, listen, I want to use you as a testimony for others because they're missing it. My creation is missing me. You're suffering right now, but remember, I saved Egypt through Joseph. If I could have just said, oh, well, Joseph, go plant a field, here's a couple of $1 million and then make sure that there's enough food for you and your brothers, and I could have done the story a whole different way. There would have been no side foreshadows, there would have been no extra promises, no testimony for Pharaoh and so on, and what do we have? Sometimes your life is that testimony, but we have to get past our excuses. How many times are we going to make an excuse? I just don't want to, I don't like that person, it's too difficult, you've loved the plan, wrong guy, I can't do that, I'm standing on my head, whatever you want to do. People are going to look at me funny. We have to get past this and focus again, not focusing on ourselves, but focusing on Abba. All right. So Adonai's anger blazed up against Moses and he said, don't you have a brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he's a good speaker. In fact, here he is now coming out to meet you and he'll be happy to see you. You will speak to him and put the words in his mouth and I will be with you. I'll be with your mouth and his, teaching you both what to do. Thus, he will be your spokesman to the people. In effect, for you, he will be a mouth, and for him, you will be like God. And he uses this moment to create a relationship. And he says, oh, Aaron, I'll call him, and then he'll meet up with you. We'll see that closer to the end of the chapter. Who else will be, when Moses becomes this mouthpiece, right? So when he talks to people, it will be as if God is speaking to them. Who else in the Bible carries that out? It's a longer list than you think. What is a mouthpiece of God? Prophet. How many prophets? And thus saith the Lord. Right? And when we look to Messiah, he will say in Deuteronomy 18, there will be someone like Moses, or there'll be someone like me, or someone like Moses that will come listen to him. And that is someone who speaks to God face to face, who has that direct communion, will be able to say, thus saith the Lord. And we see Yeshua play out that entire truth as well. It says, now take this staff in your hand because you needed to perform signs. So I'm sick of your excuses. I'm sending your brother to back you up so you're not going to run away from this thing and go. Moses left, returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, I beg you to let me go and return to my kinsmen in Egypt to see if they're still alive. Now we can look at this one or two ways. He goes there out of respect for his father-in-law and says, listen, I need you to let me go so I can fulfill this. Okay? In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I hope Jethro doesn't say no. Right? Think?
Stay. I'm not going anywhere.
No, and it's like, sorry God, I tried. Jethro said no.
Like God is gonna okay.
I know you did try.
Yes, it's okay, my boy, you're right. I'll go talk to someone else. Right? Sometimes we use people as an excuse of why we don't do stuff. Okay? But thankfully, Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. Adonai said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt because all the men who wanted to kill you are dead. Moses, don't panic. The guy who wanted your head, no longer there. So Moses took his wife and his sons and put them on a donkey and started out for Egypt. Moses took God's staff in his hand. Adonai said to Moses, when you get back to Egypt, make sure that you do before Pharaoh every one of the wonders I have enabled you to do. We do not miss one of the wonders. Why?
So that Pharaoh must know who he's dealing with.
Well,
And it's a God that's powerful, almighty.
okay, but if I gave you 7 out of the 10 plagues, wouldn't 7 signs been enough for one man?
No, but Pharaoh's stubborn.
Yeah.
He's got a stubborn one.
But God knew that, so why do I have to go through 10 exactly? Why can't we do 9?
It has something to do with 10.
10 is generally a number of covenant, like the 10 commandments. Right? So what is it?
What does he have to do all the time?
Want jy ook dit game met soos al die signs gedoen? Nee, om wat moet jy besgooi nie?
Wasn't it to go against their false gods?
50 graantjies vir jou.
Yes.
That is the right answer, my good man.
Kijk.
Remember, every time he pulls out a plague, it's a challenge to the deity that you think will save you, that you think is God. If I miss one, you can stand there and go, haha, you've conquered every single one except for that guy, he still lives. He must be too strong for you. When God walked out there, there was not one God left standing.
Yeah.
Right? So the challenge gets laid down. Nevertheless, I'm going to make him hard-hearted, and he will refuse to let the people go. So he's going to say, I want to do this. Don't panic. Then you are to tell Pharaoh, Adonai says, Israel is my firstborn. I have told you to let my son go in order to worship me, but you have refused to let him go. Well, then I will kill your firstborn son. That's already plague number what?
10. Last one.
He says this is where it's going to end up. Up until we get to the point where Pharaoh loses his firstborn, it's all part of the plan. What we're going to see is Moses is going to do a plague, and he didn't listen. I know, do this plague. He didn't listen. And he
But
did
one
it again,
should have
and
thought-
again.
With hearing that, what is coming, Pharaoh would have said, I don't want to lose my son. Go.
Yeah, well, that was the arrogance of Pharaoh that he played. He gambled with his son's life to prove that he was God.
Sure.
Okay? He says, at a lodging place on the way, Adonai met Moses and would have killed him. Your translation reads the same, yes? Go, I'm sending you halfway, but I'm going to take you out. And you go, no, Vince, I think you're reading the wrong translation. That's Satan, is it not? Does your translation read the same? Why?
Are we reading verse 24?
Yeah. On the lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and
would
was
have-
about to kill him.
Right.
Also blocking.
Had not, verse 25, had not Zipporah taken a flintstone and cut off the foreskin of her son. She threw it at his feet, saying, what a bloody bridegroom you are for me. But then God, let Moses be. She added, a bloody bridegroom because of circumcision. Now you're going to stop. This Arab didn't want to listen. Made all the excuses. Eventually surrenders. And then he goes. He takes his family. And he's going to go have this moment. And God says, not one step further. Now why?
That needed to be fixed before anything came.
Why?
Covenant.
Because it's covenant. They all had to
I'm
be
the
under
God of Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. And you are representing my kingdom and you haven't dealt with your own children? Remember what it said in Genesis 17? Anybody who refuses to be circumcised in his flesh is to be what from our people?
shunned,
Cut off.
cut.
You don't, and you come to God face to face and you don't think, hang on a second, if I'm going to be going out over there, I should be doing this. I probably think that Moses had an inkling, he probably should have done this, but he refused. And that comes to the place of, again, where he says, you are messing with holiness now. You are messing with covenant. You are messing with my agenda. My agenda is, I'm a covenant-keeping God. I've come to take out the covenant people, but I want to prove to the world who I am. Let's not get in the way of that. So, verse 27. Adonai said to Aaron, go into the desert to meet Moses. He went, met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. So Aaron comes up and he has this visit. Moses told him everything Adonai had said in sending him, including the signs that he had ordered him to perform. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the leaders of the people of Israel. Aaron said everything Adonai had told Moses, who then performed the signs for the people to see. The people believed when they heard that Adonai had remembered the people of Israel and see how they were oppressed. They bowed their heads and worshipped. Now, the leaders are in, guys, I told you this is going to be the way it is, and now all of a sudden we're going to hit a hard at Pharaoh. And as soon as things get difficult for these people, Pharaoh adds restrictions to their bricks and all other things. They're going to grumble as fast as they believe. God's got an agenda to set you free. It's going to be a tough little battle between the gods of Egypt versus the one true God. The end result will be freedom. But it's going to take a little bit of time. Right? So sometimes through the process, we need to remember that what God promised us is still going to be established. If it takes a little bit longer than what we thought, trust in His timing. If it's a bit of a tougher process than what we thought, He hasn't forgotten His promise. When we get to the place where we can go, I believe, and I will trust to the end. Okay? Any questions?
I think one thing that's in Moses' failure is he's coming up with all these excuses. Obviously, he didn't want to do it, and then God actually took the time to explain to him. Because a lot of times we're thrown into a situation where we feel God's sending us into, but we don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's waiting for us. And then even after giving answer to all his excuses, God actually takes the time to explain to him how this is going to go down.
Yeah.
He says, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, we're going to start with this plague and we're going to end with this plague, and he actually goes and tells him the future.
He gives him enough detail and leaves him enough in the dark to be able to go, okay,
Yes.
Father, you've got this.
Yes. So just to give him that confidence that he needs.
Okay? Anything else?
It's interesting that you have the whole story of Moses and God, but for Aaron, God went to him and told him to go and he goes. So does he just go? Or?
How much older was Aaron then, or younger than? Nou is ek confused, dis my eie tong. Hoe jonger was as Moses dat hy geleef het?
I think they actually believe that Aaron was the older brother and he was about
So he was already older and then
about 83 from what the guys think.
If he knew Moses was alive.
Some guys will say, when God says, oh, and he'll be pleased to see you.
Yeah, he
Right?
was like,
So they think there was a little bit of animosity between the two brothers. One growing up in the palace and the other one growing up as a slave. I'm the one who's going to set the captives free. The other one going, right? So we've got this interesting sort of play again between family and God bringing them together for the sake of what He wants to do. And again, restoration, this is the work you're going to do. And Aaron doesn't seem to have that same stuttering problem. I'm not talking about his mouth, I'm talking about his feet.
yeah, Aaron just,
Yeah.
okay, let's do this.
I'm the God of your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, your brothers. Go and help your brother. Okay. And he seems to have obviously a much less of a dialogue to be able to get there and go, okay, now what? God said I must come now. Now tell me what's going on.
It could also be that maybe because Moses grew up in the palace, he was used to other people doing stuff for him. I don't know if that's...
Maybe. I think he was very nervous of that reality.
And then his brother, who grew up doing stuff for himself, was more accustomed to, if he was said to do something, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Again, Moses was the one who understood authority better than anybody else. So walking out that authority that God has sent you, that's a difficult thing to do. Yeah. I'll tell you what, let's pray and remind me I'm talking about authority. Father, we just want to thank you again for this time together. We thank you for your word, Father, and we just pray that you would just highlight in each one of us, Father, if we're busy making excuses, Father, or if we are not understanding who you fully are, Father, I just pray that you'd reveal that to us, Father. I pray that you would help us understand our identity and what you've called us to do. And as you send us out, Father, I pray that you would fulfill that and fulfill those promises, Father, because we can't do it in ourselves. You have to do this through us, Father. And we just thank you that you've chosen us to be part of this journey, that you would have your name glorified as a testimony to those who don't know you, Father. For those that are stuck in deception, Father, we just thank you that you'll go deal with them, Father. And we know that you do it in a loving way. So we thank you that you have chosen us. We thank you that you've called us, Father. And we just pray that you would help us walk in obedience for your glory. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.